So I think just to take that point forward, I think coming to the defense of what TV said, the boring part of the banking is boring, but I think it's good stuff as well. I think we talk about the US as an example where a lot of disintermediation has happened, but when you look at other parts of the world, when you look at Europe, and you look at markets like Germany, for example, which are very strong economies, very industrial economies, banking is all it reflects, how Indian industry works as well. It's family owned, small companies. It's interesting to see, you have companies, 50, 70 million euros of sales who do exceedingly well and actually are global in their own product area. So, and it's all banking driven. I mean, so the US has, US also today has maybe 7,000 banks or so, down from the 11,000 it had. But banking is very local, banking is very relationship driven, and it serves the need in terms of the local community and the local industry. So the US market, is the biggest market, $15 trillion. So when you look at it, everything sounds big. And I guess there are a lot of large companies as well, so this intimidation sounds big. But I think basic banking, basic financing, basic working capital, basic trade finance is core of even a bank like HSBC who I used to work for. That really drives the franchise globally. That really franchise. So I think we can expect the mutual fund industry to contribute. I think, but banking needs to stay place in as well. I think in terms of India, and I'm the new kid of the office in India, so maybe not that I'm person to advice currently. But really, in terms of, I think the way I look at India and the mutual fund industry, given the demographics, given, I guess, 35% of the savings and all of that you mentioned, I think the curve is only one way. But the Indian market and the regulators have been beating the drum about it a lot in terms of the market itself, the liquidity, the free float, a lot of the follow-on offerings and things like that happening right now in terms of companies trying to get down to 75%. So I think unless you have a genuine market, liquid market, a market which trades better, I guess there is more free float. Promoters' interests are aligned with the shareholders' interests. I think you touched upon that as well, which is not always the case. We have every country has issues around transparency and governance, and TV talked about it. But I think a lot of that needs to all come together for even people like me to be completely sure that I want to invest into the market and put maybe even 30-40% of my savings. So I think it's a whole bunch of factors which will happen over a period of time, and of course with a strong regulator that would help.
Yeah. It's component of the financial services industry has a role to play. Banks have a role to play, asset management companies have a role to play, insurance companies, pension funds, NBFCs have a role to play. The development of each individual segments is probably an outcome of the cycle of development cycle of the country, and it's also a cultural issue. When you have a per capita income which is of India, which is about $1,000, which was $500 a couple of years ago, you can't expect people to invest half of that in equity. So all of that necessarily goes into the banking segment. Banking segment in India, you have over 90,000 branches here. So coverage is relatively high there. So as the stage of development of the country increases, you will see more and more people accessing the other markets, equity, insurance, pension funds. And there is a need for each of these segments to develop because market needs it. Infrastructure needs 15-year, 20-year money. Banks cannot provide it beyond the point. It's the pension funds and insurance companies which have to provide. Capital market inflows have to flow through the asset management companies. So I think NBFCs have a useful role to play in certain segments. So all segments need to develop. He mentioned about regulation. Banks in India thankfully have been regulated very, very well, which has, people trust the banking market in India unlike in the US. So, so no wonder people will have to, when 2008 crisis happened, people in India, unlike in the US, they went to the banks and put all their money in deposits. So that's also a key factor in
trust factors.
Trust factor is very, very important.
And Raghunath, you mentioned something?
Saying. You have to understand Indian demographic before you comment on how soon or how fast we will get into a little more sophisticated instrument like an equity market as compared to a very safe and sound, guaranteed, insured deposit product. If you get out of campus and started taking home, let's take a number, $1 lakh a month kind of a salary, take home say 60 grand a month, your expenses are 20 grand, where will you put that 30,000 bucks? Into the next IPO or into a bank? Right? So good chance until you reach a certain threshold of savings, savings, I'm using the word very carefully, you will not dabble into riskier assets. Again, I'm choosing the word risk. As this evolution progresses, as Indian demographic itself is changing, we have a very large 120 crore population to support that demographic change. Some of these governance deficits and its flare-ups do not help that cause. Every 2 years a Satyam happens or a global trust bank happens, the guys want to flee from the equity markets. When the GFC happened, I for one told my RM, I want every rupee out of the mutual funds, put it into the bank. I pulled out every rupee. What do? Because you want safety first. And for safety, I think the banking institutions have, thanks to the RBI and it being a 60-year-old industry, if not longer, it has achieved. It has achieved the safety first approach, despite some of the scams that we have had in the past. So you have to make that transition as the country's demographic and its savings profile evolves. Only then will you have a balance that, say, the institution or countries like US or the West has had. Lastly, I think from a regulatory approach, there's a bit of a conundrum here. In the US, any IPO, for instance, you won't find any retail investor directly subscribing to it. This money goes into equities, yes, but through the institutional investor or institutional platform called the mutual fund. In India, you have a regulatory framework which is a mandatory 25% retail, and on top of that, a safety net now. So you have a situation where the regulator itself is it killing an industry or is it furthering an industry? One doesn't know. When you're caught in this kind of a conundrum, it is difficult to fathom how big this can become, and rightly so. You can't take bigger steps of either investing in a distribution which is pan-India. So why would an AMC go beyond 8 cities? Because 80% of the money comes from there. So you have this evolutionary journey we have to undertake as an evolving country. So these pains will happen, but I think over time it will settle down.
Now, we have seen distribution, we have seen investment banking, we have seen asset management. Let us see how we can bring them together. One of the key issues or one of the key trends that happened in the last few years is if you looked at banking, the products were getting more and more easier to go to the customer, between the bank and the customer, products are becoming cheaper. If you look at asset management, the entry loads went down. If you look at insurance, again there were entry loads going down. As Mrs. Korat mentioned this afternoon about ULIPs, one of the category of products, there was a huge reduction in the entry loads on ULIP products as well. So what sort of product issues do you look at to being able to enable growth in the financial services sector? Here actually I would request each of the panel members to give views on the various segments here. So I would like to start with Mr. Balasubramanian.
I think what you mentioned about the regulation came in heavily on making the financial product relatively cheaper by removing the entry load, and the same thing which happened in the case of insurance industry. There is no doubt it did happen and it had its own impact. And also one has to realize that is it being noticed and the suitable regulatory changes are being brought in. If you ask me, yes. And to reverse actually the trend which we have witnessed in the last 2 years. And you rightly mentioned about concentration is coming from top 8 cities, and the regulation has gone deeper and see actually how do we get more assets coming from the B15 cities, that is other than top 15 cities, how do you get money, and for which what are the things which need to be done. I think first time ever is also looked at the economic model for the people who are operating in the market, because it's an accepted fact that the cost element to operate and get more money from those markets is relatively higher than operating from the bigger market. So for which one need to get compensated. So that now is being looked at. And third, which of course is the struggle, I think we always talk about the innovation in the financial product, and beyond a point, innovations cannot play a role in delivering a financial product. At the end of the day, if you go by Nassim Taleb's principle, it's an 80-20 principle. 80% of the product has to be plain, vanilla, simple, accept product. It is like banking industry. It's easy for me to just say that go and put money in banking industry, knowing very well that it's not going to give any return, 5% or 6%. But then he looks at convenience, he looks at safety, he looks at something which he can sleep over it without getting worried about it. The same way, if you look at the financial product, within the financial product and the insurance product, both in the case of mutual funds and in insurance, there are plain vanilla product which ultimately serves the needs of the customers over longer term. I don't need to go and reinvent the wheel at all. And which is about 80% of the product, even in the case of equity and debt and money market instruments. So that stays, that remains. So my suggestions and the whole the assessment of the whole thing is, instead of focusing on innovating on a new product, we need to focus on what is the purpose for which the money is being invested. And that has to get again and again ring a bell in the minds of the investors. I think the more he gets that message right, that the money is being invested for certain purpose. The purpose has got attached to it, one is the time, and what is the kind of money I need to put actually. These two are, I think, once it's decided, then he gets his the outcome. Maybe closer to the right outcome what he is expecting over a long period of time. So which is what I think, in my view, is the one which has to be done, I think, more than the product innovations. Product innovation, where there is of course a scope for the people who have a lot of money. For the people who have got a lot of money, who is willing to take the risk, and there are products which are now is emerging, which is what now the regulation has now done, which is nothing but an alternate investment fund vehicle. It was actually is meant for the people who of course love actually complicated product, whether he understands around, we do not know, but definitely love to invest in something which when a moment I go and say is something new, and it can generate so much of return over a long period of time, by giving an external expected return on those investments. How does it come? Only the time will tell. But on base of expected return, I can sell the product. But this also now is available for the people who are at the higher end of the segment, who has a huge surplus to invest and looking for alternate investments.
About the banking products?
See, I think we have a very interesting challenge here. As an industry, we have to move in opposite directions simultaneously. Just to explain, all of us here have access to brick and mortar, which is branches. But I think most of us don't want to go to a branch. We want to use alternate channels. Whereas at the other extreme, at the when you talk about financial inclusion, we have to take the brick and mortar to the people at hand. So we have to work in these two opposite directions simultaneously. So you keep on increasing sophistication level, but at the same time, look at how to include the unincluded people into the banking community. So it's interesting time. Unfortunately, you cannot do it without brick and mortar, and the regulator also doesn't want you to do it without brick and mortar beyond the time. So you will have to, and that's where different, you have to develop different models. You cannot go and set up a 4,000 square feet branch in rural areas. You have to do it very, very differently. You have to do it more efficiently in a manner which doesn't intimidate the saver. If you open a nice big branch of a bank, the small saver is reluctant to come to the branch. So you have to keep care of those cultural issues also.
I would change the perspective a little to being a consumer. As a consumer of an insurance product, if I take a quick rewind, maybe about 15 years back or 17 years back, when I as a consumer need a policy, a life policy, everything around the ecosystem seems to suggest to me that I should go in for an endowment policy, because there are several forces at play which want to induce me into buying an endowment policy, whereas I may prefer to go in for a term plan. Unfortunately, the environment is full of that kind of a culture, so term plans are expensive. But what the insurance industry would have seen, I suppose, and you are better placed to comment on that, is that with the proliferation of term plans, the kind of business that insurance companies have got with selling term plans in the last maybe a decade or so, it's been a win-win for the consumer who's got reduced premium. It's a different matter. I may have missed the bus at that point of time, got an expensive product. But, I mean, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I will need to probably change my role a bit. In the sense, if you look at the insurance industry, mostly we are being told to purchase endowment products by the intermediaries. And most of the time, the term products, which now most of us are familiar with, being pure risk products, are not actually marketed so aggressively. It is obvious reasons in terms of profitability to the intermediaries and other reasons. And that has resulted in a situation where term plans became expensive because of volume issues. Now, in the last few years, with competition and private sector taking more aggressive interest in term plans, what has happened is I'm sure you're aware that you are now exposed to a large number of term plan offers with significantly competitive pricing from several companies, which are now available to you, cutting off the distributor. So a lot of disintermediation is happening, not only in mutual funds or in banking, but also in life insurance. So that's a significant trend which is happening. Disintermediation is resulting in reduction in pricing and better products to the customer, easier, faster, and more convenient. Now, on this issue, I'm wondering, in what way is this idea and the impact on the customer affecting in the larger size business deals, and what sort of impact is it having? Is there any parallels we can draw in this area?
Let me take this in a slightly cross financial services plane first. I think GFC and our own little scams on forex derivatives, if I'm not mistaken, has taught both the institutions which are called financial intermediaries and the customers, innovation is fine so long as it puts the customer first. So long as the innovation is designed around the customer and the need you office you want to satisfy, like net banking or utility payments or anything else, I think that is an investment worth the while. Anything which is innovation for the sake of the banker peddling it, it will be too good to be true because it cannot be true for long. That happened to any of the products. MBS is a great product because the bank or home finance company in the US lending home loans to hard real assets to a person actually borrowing, which means there is a human being there, there's a hard asset there. So it is supporting the real economy. And the people who lent needed the liability side managed. So somebody had to fund the liability side. Hence came somebody to put balance sheet into the liability side. But that person who lent to their HFC needs liquidity or rotation of the money he lent. So you need a secondary market for that underlying asset. Great product up to them. Then steps the investment banks and say, let me start going to the stratosphere now. Picked up some of these synthetics, created another industry around it, which had no grounding on any hard or real asset. No bank knew what underlying asset they were owning because it had gone around the world 20 times. Because it had got sliced and diced and packaged and repackaged. And hence it got so distanced, A, from the consumer, B, from the hard assets, that it completely lost relevance for all but the investment bank which peddled it. Great innovation. So long as innovation is grounded on either the real economy or the consumer, it is great to have. If an institution does not respect that, in banking, you do not get into innovation for the sake of calling yourself innovative. The customer may not give a damn about innovation. He may say, give me a simple account opening form. Don't ask for 40 pages of reading that. So your innovation should come in designing a simple form, period. If insurance, finally it is a risk product, with a little bit of sweating the investment in because you may not die, right? Fine, design a product around that. You took it to the other extreme because it was profitable for the shareholder or the underwriter. Took it to the other extreme, it was an investment product with a little bit of risk thrown in. Then came the regulator slam, I mean, he killed the industry. Yeah, you have these excesses, the regulator will come down. This is true for IPOs. This is true for M&A. If I, as a buy-side banker, my fees comes from my client, which is the buyer, to buy the asset. I get no fee if he doesn't buy it. It's in my interest to convince my client, hey, it's $100 more. It's worth it, buy it. Right? If I don that hat, I'm a great investment bank, but not a good advisor. I can innovate 25 ways to do a DCF and convince him that $100 more is right. And client will never even know that. So you have to keep the customer in mind and then innovate with that around. Or the real economy which you're supporting and then innovate. Those will build long-lasting institutions.
Can I
Yep.
just add to that?
Yeah,
Maybe
go
in a little bit in a broader manner, maybe a little tangential as well. I think in terms of, you talked about products and things like that. I think just looking at, my working life, for example, I think there are lots of things, from your point of view, possibly to think about and, which have been kind of new to me when I've gone through my phase of growth. I mean, when I started doing business and you did a transaction, you basically had what you call physical data rooms, right? You had to physically go and, sit in a room and, look at big box files. I mean, somebody thought of it very smartly and set up a virtual data room. And nowadays, today, you just have virtual data rooms. Somebody made a lot of money just doing something very simple. So I think in the financial world, we are talking about big things, but I think there are things around, basic things around, I think you talked about payments, there are things around just using basic technology to do things better, the way, documentation is done, where the way the lawyers are involved, the way the diligence people are involved. There are lots of different things which have happened in my working life, which have been all new to me. And somebody else, I'm copying them, but somebody else made a lot of money doing it. Similarly, I guess in the Indian context, and maybe relevant for all of us, is I think we've been very good in terms of, a lot of people in India have made a lot of money setting up stock exchanges, commodity exchanges, commodity platforms, all the software around it. I mean, it's an eye-opener that, that's all happened in the last maybe 7 to 8 years. So I think there's a fair bit to be done. And I think, the way I spent a little bit of time in Citibank, for some of you may not remember, but one of the guys who headed Citibank from 80s to the 90s before Sandy Weil came was John Reed. And John Reed was the first guy who installed the first ATM. He actually ran the consumer bank in Citibank. He was not a high-flying banker or anything of that kind. He actually was a technology nerd. And Walter Whitson, who was the CEO before him, made him the CEO. And he took this project, he installed the first ATM globally. And so I think there's very simple things to be done, possibly when you look back at it, but they're kind of, pioneering at that point in time. And I think there are things from your perspective, all of you are very young, to look at and do. I think one thing from an Indian perspective, which I think is very important for all of us as India, I think there's a big future in terms of, somebody getting up to, and a huge opportunity for maybe people like you in terms of what I call workout, restructuring and workout. We talked about, I think, banking situation, NPAs and things like that. That whole industry in India is very nascent, and that's because possibly the regulations are not there, the buyers are not there, and all of that. But I think in that general area of restructuring and workout, there is so much to be done. And I think that's going to be a huge industry in India, I think, the next 10 to 15 years. So that may be some as a new product or whatever. And my last two bits, I think we've talked about, in terms of major parts of the industry, but I think in the ecosystem, there is also very simple things like, good quality numbers, high quality audits, and all of that which TV touched upon. I think those basic things we also have to get right in the financial ecosystem. Because I think if we don't get that right in India, that is going to be a challenge. So for example, in the private equity industry today, there's been something like $50–55 billion which has been invested in since private equity opened up maybe in 1991, 1992. Only $20 billion has been returned back. So you look at the disconnect, somebody as an investor has given $55 billion, he's only got 20 back. The remaining 35 is gone. How long can that disconnect go on? So I think, the disconnect needs to come together. People, I think, need to start thinking longer term. The small bits needs to happen before, we can get the big picture right.
Okay, now I'm acutely aware of the time in front of me. Okay, I'm sure you're all looking at getting on to the next activity here. So you have two options. Okay, either you can ask your questions and then get delayed for dinner, or the other alternative is we can have, say, 3 or 5 questions here, and then we can go on for dinner and have a discussion there. What would you prefer? Second option. Okay, thank you. You made it easier for me. So we will have 3 or maximum 5 questions, and we will get on for dinner after that. And the faster you ask the questions, the better it is for you.
You should not ask questions.
You need to mention your name. Okay, great.
I'm Suraj from L&T. So my question is a bit of, to do with the asset management thing. See, when a bank gives me a product, a mutual fund product, and a asset management company gives me a mutual fund product. So I would, as Mr. Raghunath said, like bank, we have that safety thing coming into our minds, which has been passed on from generation as a nostalgic thing, and plus it's a bank. So how does a asset management company face a product which is being given by the bank in the mutual fund sector? So, how, like when the actually the business space has been eaten up by the bank into this, so how is that been actually taken care of?
Yeah. See, clearly the mutual fund is a market-driven product. It's a market-linked product, and you know where the money is being invested. Unlike a bank, where bank, of course, everything goes in one basket in the form of deposits, they decide where to put the money, and you'll never get to see where money is being invested. But that doesn't mean the money is not safe there, but of course it's safe because of the regulatory environment they are operating. Because every rupee of deposit what they take, they are going to put money in 25%, they have to put in SLR, 4% they have to put in CRR. Then they have to go on excess risk for them to generate whatever the return would they have to generate, which is in the form of lending. But the mutual fund clearly is a market-linked product where you can see where the money is being invested. But does it mean that one need to worry about the safety? It frankly is not necessary, for the reason that the industry is operating in a very tightly regulated environment, which of course goes to define where the underlying money can be invested in every schemes for which the money is being invested. So that takes care of the risk part. So today the risk which has to be managed by the money managers by us. Then second, risk has to be monitored by the risk management team, which also has got some internal guidelines. And top of it, there is also an external guideline which also goes to the extent of defining how much of the money can be invested. Just to give an example, I have the fortune of being in the industry for more than now 2 decades now. The entire regulation has come because of us. In the sense that 1999 was the period where the entire mutual fund industries, or for that matter anybody who is in the industries, used to take bet only on one single sector, which is the TMT sectors. Anything in the world you talk about, TMT is the only one which will ring in the minds of everybody. All other sectors are sectors which can be ignored. But while it was true till 1999, post 1999 things changed completely. And that's the time the regulation came, sector-wise limit. The fixed income side. And of course everybody was going and making investments in all sectors, irrespective of whichever the sectors, without looking at the solvency of the sectors for which the money is being lent. And then the regulation came in the sense that post 2008, how much of the exposures can be taken even in the real estate sectors. You can take exposure in real estate sectors, but how much of the exposures can be taken. So all those things have gone into actually more in such a micro details, clearly actually brings in the necessary protection that is needed for the investor's point of view. And that's why I think the differentiation has to be done. The last, from the investor's point of view, the mutual fund industry which definitely offers is a relatively a better tax adjusted return to the bank deposits for the risk what you are taking here. Here there is no predictability on the return, for which you are also being given some kind of bonus element in the form of tax advantage, which doesn't exist in the case of fixed deposits.
But having said that, mutual fund investments are subject to market risk.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, I think we'll take another question.
Hello, sir. I'm Gaurav Sapra from SP Jain. Sir, if we take an example, let's take example of Morgan Stanley, where a large portion of the global revenues are coming from the wealth management business, if we include both the retail as well as the HNI business. But if we look at the Indian landscape, Morgan Stanley is planning to shut down their wealth management business in India. So from the Indian landscape, what do you feel is the future of wealth management business or the private wealth management business?
Let me take that. Again, wealth management has gone through its own travails of what was done in the name of wealth management and how customers felt at the time of the GFC. So the Indian wealth managers were not far behind. Hence, the market in India and size in India being as shallow as it is across any product, be it banking sector, life insurance or mutual fund, penetration levels are very, very low. So you have a high cost business called wealth, because you have to pay the private bankers a lot more than you would pay the guy in the teller in a bank. It is a high cost model, and if the market is shallow, and on top of that the customer has somewhere lost faith on private bankers really being in their interests, yes, the overheads start biting you. So you tend to either withdraw or go away. Having said that, Kotak is one of the leading private banks in India, wealth managers in the country. And again, we metamorphosed, not at the time of GFC, but thankfully before that, in that we aligned our fees to the success of the money of the client. So the client's interest and my interests got aligned from the word go. And it's a very stable business for us. We are adding clients. And I'm not saying we are hiring, but we are adding clients.
I think that's a very important point. It's extremely critical. The returns which the organization makes is linked to the returns which the customer makes. So there's a critical link there. Is that, have I understood you rightly, Raghunath?
Yeah, and the more important point in that spectrum of businesses, you have to get the equation right between the high fixed cost model to the revenue volatility. Investment bank, private bank is a high fixed cost model. So you take on $2 million salary guys and hope for earning investment banking revenues, and in a market where in India fees are coming down per transaction, you have to then sustain the volatility in your P&L. You may have a bumper $10 million PBT one year, maybe negative 10 in another year because you got 5 $2 million fat cats there. And in a global context, if there is a CEO sitting in a corner in New York who is seeing red on his P&L, he wants to start cutting. This is an inanimate dot on the map.
Yep.
So you have those volatility risks.
Okay, we'll take a last question before I hand over the situation to Aditi.
Hi, myself Vishwa from Reliance Life Insurance. This is an open question. Here, I wanted to highlight the thing that as we are all aware that a lot of regulations have been imposed in the life insurance sector, and considering that the business has come down. So we are looking at, the interest of the customer here. Now, are we not proposing all this? Is the government not looking at, the interest of the industry as well, in terms of, making some life insurance mandatory to, procure some driving license, or making life insurance mandatory to for the parents to get the, children admitted to a school or something? So it's about, having some mandate from the government side for the benefit of the industry.
Yeah, I understand your question. I think I'll give a response before somebody else can respond too. I think, mandation, let's take that example. We have third-party liability which is mandatory in the general insurance business. Now, mandation is not necessarily the best way in a democratic or a capitalistic society or a developing society. It's important to allow competitive forces to control these things and growth of the business. But coming back to her very valid point, which is she's implying that some regulations resulted in a fall in the business, which is what the life insurance industry has gone through. It is a short-term impact. It is a short-term impact of regulations which are in the interest of the consumer, in the interest of the buyer. No industry can survive, whether it is life insurance or general insurance or banking or investment banking or mutual fund asset management. No industry can survive if the customer interests are not protected. So I think from a more longer term, this is a great idea. Yes, I can understand the short-term impact and the pain that the industry goes through, but in the long term, you have created a very trustworthy industry. You have created a trustworthy organization. The entire industry players become more trusted, and that's how the business will grow. I think I will request Bala to come in as one of the first speakers to be able to give some feedback there.
Yeah. I think clearly what you said is right, that some of the decisions which is now have hurted the industry growth in the last 3-4 years. One is, of course, not only just poor sentiment, even the regulation. That is equally applicable for the insurance industry. But also, in my view, is an outcome of what the industry also did, which is like ULIP grew significantly, and then they felt that that is not the right product from the investor's point of view. You have to have long-term product. That's where term and endowment and all came into the picture very aggressively. Clearly, the fact which I think one has to accept today is this realization is not only there with you as an intermediary, it's also there with the regulator today, which is the beauty of our country, and it's the beauty of our regulator. And today's regulator is conscious about the fact that, and also cognizant of the fact that something needs to be done for the revival of the industry, which also is essential from the very good development of the capital market. And the insurance industry plays a bigger role, especially in the capital market. Of course, more from the consumer point of view, definitely yes, but the capital market point of view also plays a bigger role. Again, it's a question of time, as we have seen in the case of mutual fund regulation. The insurance industry also will go through a favorable regulatory changes in the next maybe a few quarters, which will again bring back the some bit of positive vibes in the industry, both from the intermediaries point of view as well as from the consumer's point of view.
Here's an interesting facet you brought up, and that's a characteristic of a developing economy that to a democracy. When global majors come and ask us on India entry advice, while of course we show targets and this and that, and then over a cup of tea or whatever drinks they may ask, what's your overall advice as we are planning to come to India? We tell them one thing, come with lots of patience.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll tell you why. In a developing economy that too with such large mass, there's a momentum to any change you make. It gets multiplied by 120 crores, right? There is a yo-yo between what the industry does and what the regulator then reacts to that. Okay? Let me give you an example. For 50 years, if not longer, the money that you kept in your savings account, guess how the mathematics was working on it for your interest on your savings money? It used to be the minimum balance during the month multiplied by the savings rate for 50 years. Although your salary may have got credited on day one, it would have remained there for 10 days. There is a weighted average, if I were to put it by day weighted, which may be much higher than the minimum balance. Because the minimum balance will be on the last day of the month before your next salary gets credited. The industry had a gala time, so they were paying you interest on the minimum balance, although they got credit for the 29 days they left a larger money. One fine day, with the flick of a pen, the RBI just said, this is looting. They didn't say that in that many words. They said, from tomorrow you shall pay on daily balances, period. Right? So there is a yo-yo that will always happen in a developing economy. Coal mines. Yeah, power projects came up, they thought coal will come because it was a policy. But in came, thanks to the liberalization, some guys with not so great intentions cornered them and flipped them, having got them at low prices. Then came a clampdown. So today power plants are shutting down. Does it mean you won't generate power? Probably not. So the industry player needs to come with a bit of patience. It's pretty testing though, but unless you have that horizon in a developing economy, you're going to switch off or switch on like an MNC can afford to, an Indian player cannot afford to. If I'm a bank here, I jolly well continue to be a bank. I can't say I'm off from India tomorrow.
Okay, I think we will not take any more questions now. I will request Aditi to take control of the proceedings. Group 4.